Welcome to the Why Examine the Comb. And it may seem in this little module that we're backtracking, but stick with me. We're not just backtracking, we're just shoring up the reasons why we want to examine this comb. So it is because of the health of your hive that you want to examine the comb. And examining the health of your hive entails many pieces that we've started to go over. And here I have listed 5 of the reasons, and we're going to start with number 1 in this module. So number 1 is your hive queen right? And that means, is there a queen in your hive? There can be a virgin queen, there can be a laying queen, there could be queen cells. If your hive is queen right, that means you have a mated laying queen. It can mean that you have a virgin, but that is a situation that you then have to keep tabs on to monitor, because virgins have to still take their marriage flight and they don't always come back. Number 2, what is the quality of your queen? 3, what are the quality of your stores? And this one touches mostly on your pollen stores, but yes, your quality of your stores. Do you have stores in your hive? Number 4, the diseases and or pests of the hive. And 5, your colony strength. Colony strength means the population of your hive and how many frames is that covering. And so we'll move on to, is your hive queen right? Again, what is queen right mean? What does queen right mean? It means that there is a laying queen in your hive. So what are the ways to tell? And what is the evidence to prove it one way or the other? This is a big one for especially beginner beekeepers. They're always afraid that they squish the queen, or that she's not laying enough, or that they somehow have acquired a laying worker. So this is the best time to really get knowledge, to not always be afraid of a queenless hive. A queenless hive may be in the making of a new queen. So it's not an emergency. It's something to watch, and you have some time, and you have to know what are the signs to look for, and that's what we're going to do. So when you go into your hive and you're trying to say, okay, where is the queen? I don't always look for a queen. I look for signs of a queen. And the major sign of a queen is not larvae, but eggs. The first sign I look for to ensure that it's a queen right hive is eggs. Eggs mean that she has been there in at least the last 3 days, because eggs only stay eggs for 3 days, 3.5. That is your first sign. And then after that, I look for young brood, because there may be a reason that the queen stopped laying and she's still there. However, eggs are the surest sign. And then what is the youngest larva that we see? And in this picture, you can see right next to the eggs, which is called the egg line, is the larva, the very young larva. So what do the eggs tell you? That she was there 3 days ago, which for the most part is just fine. She was there 3 days ago. She's still laying. You just don't see her. We don't always have to see the queen. That is a sure sign that she has been there. The pheromones still pretty good in there. And then you will be able to tell slightly once you get the hang of it by the way the bees act. But looking for those eggs, and if you don't see them on one frame, you do have to pull another until you either find absolutely none or you just find some. One of the big problems is seeing eggs, and especially as we get older and our eyes tend to get funny, is how to see eggs. Not even young people can always see eggs, because you just don't know what to look for. And you should study those pictures. It is kind of like a grain of rice. It stands on end, but you don't always see it. So to be able to see eggs in the frame. One, you want the sun behind you. You want it over your shoulder, and you hold the frame up as you're peering into the frame of cells. And you can rock that frame back and forth until you get to see it in the cell. When your comb is brand new, it's pretty hard to see. Older, darker comb, you may find it easier to see the eggs. Some people find the black plastic comb, but I'm not into the plastic in my hive so much, so the darker the comb, sometimes it's the easier. And you hold the comb up and adjust it until it shines into that cell. Because that cell is tipped slightly, you have to rock it back and forth. And you can also follow the laying pattern. The laying pattern is generally look for her capped brood and start working your way back from older larva all the way up to where you find eggs. It's called the egg line, but you're using it in reverse. So you want to find some old larva, and then whichever way it goes, to the right, to the left, to the center, or towards the outskirts of the frame, you work towards the younger and younger larva. And generally she lays in that pattern. She doesn't kind of shotgun it. And if she's shotgunning a pattern, then that's another problem. But you follow that laying pattern of larva from oldest to youngest, and she'll lay in that fashion. Here are some examples of us in the apiary. On the far right, you can see the circular concentric rings. So if I was to follow the capped brood, then in the very center of that frame, basically where the bees are, that's probably where I'm going to find eggs. The older larva will be right next to the capped brood. In the other two pictures are myself and my daughter, and you hold the frame and you hope that the sun is behind you or turned so that it is, and shine that sun down into those cells and look for the eggs. It's just a conscious effort, and all of a sudden it will become second nature to you. So just make sure that, it's not that you can't see them. You just haven't learned how to see them yet. And you will be able to see it. Give yourself confidence. Give yourself a break. You'll see them. And sometimes looking at these pictures to recognize what an egg looks like will help you overcome that fear. So when you see a hive that you're not quite sure, it could be a virgin queen. They're not acting aggressive. Is it a virgin queen? So when you go into that hive that you think is a little bit odd, you will be looking for queen cells. If she's a virgin, there should be cells, open queen cells that show that she's there. Now, sometimes bees eat these cells down, but there may be cells left that you can actually see. You also may have just requeened your hive, and you may have chosen to purchase a virgin queen and wait for her to come back. And if there's larva, again, it's that timeline to know the length of time that the workers are pupa, larva, or emerging. So you have to look and see, is there anything going on in that hive as far as larva or capped brood? If you find eggs. If there's eggs, she's not a virgin anymore. Eggs mean mated. If there's multiple drops of eggs, it could mean a laying worker or a new queen. And we'll get into that a little bit. So this picture shows that this queen made her marriage flight and came back and started laying. Perfect little eggs right in the center of the cells, and there are no other brood around her. It's a sure sign that this was a virgin that came back and just started laying. And especially you should know if you put in a virgin that you're waiting on someone to come back. But if you had a hive that maybe had an old queen and you were wondering, did they finally requeen by themselves, a natural requeening event? You're looking for eggs. And if you don't find eggs, then you have to find her. That's basically the only time you have to find her, unless you're doing something else with her. Now, if she is a newly mated queen, she could also do drops of eggs that are multiple quantities. This frame actually shows you 3 eggs in a cell. And a lot of people are fearful of a laying worker when this happens. But as you can see in this picture, they're not multiple eggs laid on the cell walls. They are basically right in the center of the cells. If it's a laying worker, they kind of lay haphazardly. Her abdomen cannot reach to the center of the cell to deposit the egg, and so she lays very messy. This is just a brand new queen, maybe has a smaller population, but she's raring to go, and she's laying extra eggs. It's not a problem. The bees will either eat them back, take them, they'll only allow 1 per cell, and they'll clean that right up. If you are afraid that your hive is queenless, there is something called the queenless roar. And I don't always hear it, although when I go to requeen, there is a hum that they make. They tend to be louder when they're queenless, but what I've also found is in my apiary, some bee will always come out to sort of hit me, tell me what's going on, and let me know that they're not happy. Now, in a large apiary, they can hit you all you want. You can't find that single hive. But in your backyard, if they're coming out to talk to you and not leave you alone and they seem aggressive, you may have a queenless hive. But if you listen to them, they're not humming. So when you know that they're queen right, listen to them. And if they tend to start making a different noise, they sound louder, buzzier, make note of it and start looking to see, is your hive queen right? Goethe, doubt can only be removed by action. And it's perfect for our queenless hive. If you're afraid that there's something not quite right, is your queen there or not, you can only find out by your actions of inspecting the comb. Don't be afraid of queenlessness, just learn from it. So on to our quality of stores. Pollen. Pollen is a superfood in the hive, and it is what is fed to the brood. So we want to look at the quality of our stores, what and how much. So one question is your pollen fresh? And you may say, oh, of course it's fresh, they just went and got it. But as we have hives in the yard, there may be old pollen, and there may be too much pollen, too much of a good thing. And I'll explain what I mean here. So this is fresh pollen. Fresh pollen has a matte coloring. It's not glossy, it's not shiny. And you can see here in this picture, the bees, it's all fresh pollen. They've just brought it in. It's very, very like matte or dull. It's not shiny. Older pollen, however, can have a very glossy look. It's not that older pollen is bad for them. Pollen is pollen. They'll use it. But it tells you something about what's happening in your hive. It says that they went out and they got it, and they're not using it to rear their brood. So why are they not consuming these stores that they have? And this will probably coincide, if you see older pollen like this, it will probably coincide with a hive that's either dwindling or has dwindled or maybe has finally overcome to a pest. Too much pollen. Too much pollen may be a sign of a failing queen. If you get a queen and you mark her or have her marked from someone like myself and you know her age, you may realize that you're seeing frames in these older hives, but the brood isn't keeping up. Frames of pollen mean that the queen is telling them what to do, and she may not be laying enough so that all those stores are being consumed. There are plenty of times you're going to see a frame of pollen, and it's a new queen, and it's in spring. It does not mean she's failing. It just means that resources are absolutely plentiful. But it's something to keep in mind when you know that your queen is a couple of years old, or you've let her have free reign of the confine her in any way, and she's been laying up like crazy, and all of a sudden you start seeing these frames, just frame after frame, 1 or 2 is a lot, 3, that, hey, she may be on her way out. Pollen can be reused, so these frames, if you decide to requeen, they will be consumed eventually, or you can take it out and put it into another. But remember, too much pollen, more than a frame or so, especially after brood rearing, and they're still just collecting pollen, may be a sign of a failing queen. Each aspect of your hive must be examined, and in each inspection, this is your opportunity to ensure the health of your hive. You want to get to know your bees and recognize the problems before the hive is past the point of recovery. You don't want to have it overrun and then the bees abscond or they've dwindled past any point of return and you lose your hobby, your investment. Inspecting each of these aspects of the hive, you can then ensure the health of your hive and a continuous life of that hive for many, many years. So we're going to move on to other aspects of what can be found in examining comb. So get to know your bees and recognize problems before the hive is past any point of recovery. You don't want a hive to dwindle. You can have a hive that lives for years.